Good evening, everyone. This is Dr. Rostenberg again from BeyondMTHFR.com. This is the second and final video in a series titled Gut Origin of Methylation Problems. Now, the reason I'm putting this video together is to share with you the idea that what goes on in your digestive tract can influence the expression of your genes and the function of your biochemistry. And the takeaway with this whole thing is when individuals who do genetic testing find out that they have a slowed methylation cycle or an impaired detoxification cycle or some phase 1 or phase 2 detox issues, lots of different things can come up. When you take supplements for those problems and you get worse or your symptoms exacerbate or flare up, what you're likely dealing with is a gut problem that hasn't yet been addressed. And as you go through the slides in these two videos and read the blog post, you'll see that the gut has an absolutely huge influence on how our genes, methylation genes, and detox pathways are functioning. So just a quick review from last video, we're talking about the idea that what happens inside the gut influences our body, and certainly it influences the liver very heavily. So the gut produces aldehydes, which we'll talk about. We've already spoken about phenols, and we're also going to talk about right now an important part of the gut, products from the gut that are aromatic amino acids. Now, you may have heard of aromatic amino acids. I bet you have. You've probably heard of tryptophan. People eating turkey at Thanksgiving, they get tired because of all the tryptophan in their food. That's at least the urban legend. That's not exactly how it works, but regardless, you've heard of tryptophan. You've likely heard of tyrosine. You've likely heard of phenylalanine. It's true that we can take these in supplements, and we use those in our office all the time with patients. But it's important to realize that your gut bacteria produces these amino acids also. Yes, your gut bacteria produce the same vitamins that you take in supplements. So it's possible then that the bacteria, if it's imbalanced and if there's an overabundance of one type of bacteria, or there's an infection where there's just way too much bacteria, that you could in fact have an individual with an excess of aromatic amino acids. So this is saying that all kinds of different probiotics can make tryptophan. They can make tryptophan that helps us make serotonin, it helps us make melatonin, it helps us sleep and have positive feelings, and certainly keeps our brain and nervous system working well. We can look at another slide that highlights this again. So this is called the Shikamate pathway. So the Shikamate pathway exists in plants. It exists in the bacteria in our gut. And here you can see through the complex chemistry that you end up with tyrosine, phenylalanine, and tryptophan. So what this says is that in bacteria, fungi, and plants, the three aromatic amino acids are synthesized from the common precursor from the Shikamate pathway. And what this really means to you, whether you're a patient or just a curious individual or a doctor or researcher, is that when individuals have symptoms of overmethylation, anxiety, pain, inflammation, insomnia, or some sort of other manifestation of an imbalanced methylation system, you have to look at the gut, because the gut could be producing an enormous amount of tyrosine or phenylalanine that's the precursor to dopamine and adrenaline, for example. So someone could have high levels of adrenaline in their body because they have the COMT gene, because they have phenol exposure imbalance, and then you throw in on top of that a lot of tyrosine, you're throwing fuel onto that fire. So it's important to recognize that the products from the gut, in this case the aromatic amino acids, can turn into neurotransmitters. So yes, your gut produces the precursors of your neurotransmitters. The gut-brain connection in scientific form. So we'll look again. You can see I'm just showing you some background here that the aromatic amino acids are where we get dopamine and serotonin from. So it's not my opinion, it's the scientific fact that tryptophan and tyrosine become serotonin and dopamine respectively. So here's your evidence that what goes on in the gut influences your brain. Now, I would say that in individuals with an overabundance of gut bacteria, someone with SIBO or a gut infection, the problem that they may have is that they're getting way too much tryptophan and way too much tyrosine in their body. That would be just the logical consequence of having too much bacteria. But there's another problem that we're seeing show up now, and that has to do with Roundup and GMO foods. I used to think the problem with GMO was the fact that they were using viruses and combining DNA in very strange ways. My opinion has changed. My opinion is that GMO foods are dangerous because of the Roundup and the glyphosate inside them. That's where the real damage is occurring. And so glyphosate, aka Roundup, blocks the Shikamate pathway. So I just showed you how the Shikamate pathway produces tryptophan, phenylalanine, and tyrosine. Glyphosate blocks that, and that's how it kills weeds and living things. It kills them because it makes it impossible for these plants and weeds and to produce these amino acids that are needed to survive. And so this becomes important when we look at autism. This wonderful researcher here, Dr. Stephanie Seneff, she has done some groundbreaking research, and what you're looking at is the yellow bars here are the number of children and individuals diagnosed with autism, overlaid with the use of glyphosate in corn and soy. So, correlation is not causation, but it should definitely get your attention that there's something going on between the poisoning of our gut bacteria and the rates of autism. And so the argument is that because Roundup and the GMO chemicals they're using to kill all these weeds, that they're not toxic to humans. Well, it's true that our body itself doesn't have the Shikamate pathway, but the bacteria that live in our gut, as I've shown you, do. And we need to take care of our microbiome, not assault it with these toxic chemicals that do all kinds of things. Now, Dr. Stephanie Seneff has published over 170 peer-reviewed journal articles. She's an MIT PhD scientist. She believes that in 10 years, half of all children will be autistic. And when you look at what glyphosate does to the body, it mimics a lot of the things we see in autism: low zinc, iron deficiency, low sulfate, seizures, and mitochondrial disorders. So that's a wake-up call for all of us. Steer clear of the GMOs. Now, we've talked about phenols in the previous video. We've just got done talking about aromatic amino acids. I want to share with you another aspect of what happens in our gut, and we're going to talk about aldehydes. Everybody listening has probably heard of formaldehyde. It's a toxic, cancer-causing chemical. Well, we also produce aldehydes that are similar to formaldehyde inside of our body, and aldehydes are indeed toxic. Our body has to take measures to detoxify the aldehydes from our system, otherwise it can cause problems. So acetaldehyde is a carcinogenic product of alcohol fermentation and metabolism in microbes, aka the gut, associated with cancers of the upper digestive tract. And we know that Candida albicans, yeast, can produce high levels of acetaldehyde from sugar when there's low oxygen. So what this means is, in your gut, in my gut, and everyone's gut, if the gut is unhealthy, there can be fungal species, Candida and other yeasts, that are producing and fermenting your sugars into alcohol and aldehyde, and essentially making us sick that way. So just more research proving, here's the gut, you've got the aldehyde production, I've circled it, showing up in our colonic environment and other parts of our gut, and these aldehydes leak into our body and they interfere with the breakdown of our neurotransmitters. Again, the whole idea with this whole video series is to show you that what's coming in from the gut is slowing down genes that are already going slower. So the gut is influencing the genetic expression by inhibiting what's already inhibited. And this is where people are, in my opinion, getting really frustrated with their methylation support, with their protocols that they're doing. You're taking really good supplements, but you're not seeing anything change. And that's because you've got to get to the source of where the problem is, and you've got to clean up the gut to get these aldehydes and phenols and aromatic amino acids into balance. So this is basically just proving again that Candida produces aldehydes that can cause cancer, and if it's strong enough to cause cancer, believe me, it's strong enough to screw up your methylation cycle. So more data here on the ethanol side. So I mentioned that the yeast produces aldehydes, but they also produce alcohol, which is why we have liquor stores to begin with, because of the the effect of yeast on sugars. But you can see that ethanol, aka alcohol, results in inhibition of methionine synthase. So what this means is that if you're like me and many of my patients, and you have a genetic report where you have yellow or red in your MTHFR system or your MTR or your MTRR, and you have a problem with yeast, well, the yeast is producing alcohol, and the alcohol is slowing down your MTR even more. So it's like having extra SNPs in a way. The environment is slowing down the gene, making the methylation cycle even less functional. So this is just more proof that when you clean up the gut and you get yeast under control and you improve digestion, you absolutely improve the methylation cycle. So this is alcohol from yeast inhibits methionine synthase and depletes glutathione. Some things, we want to make sure we have plenty of glutathione and that our methionine synthase is working very well. We've also, that was the alcohol side of it. The aldehydes that are produced, the acetaldehydes, also inhibit methionine synthase. They simply shut it off. So with this information in hand, what I want to reinforce with you is, when it comes down to looking at genetics, there's an enormous amount of value in understanding these pathways and knowing what the COMT does and what kind of things it breaks down, the sulfonotransferase genes as well, and not really all the genes that we're studying. It's important to know how they work, but we have to also look at the environment. And just like you plant a seed in the soil, it's how that seed grows in the soil that determines the health of that plant. And our bodies are no different. When we have methylation problems like COMT, MAOA, MTR, and sulfonotransferase, it doesn't mean that we can't be healthy. But what it does mean is that we're more sensitive to imbalances, especially those in our gut. And when you recognize that the gut produces phenols that slow down the COMT system, when the gut produces ethanol, alcohols, and aldehydes that interfere with methionine synthase and deplete glutathione, you get an idea that the gut is going to influence your genetics, because the gut is producing compounds that are leaking into your body 24/7. So in my office, we help patients deal with this process. As I've said before, it's not something that takes 6 months in most cases. In most cases, it resolves fairly quickly. You just have to do everything right. You have to have the right diet, the right advice, the right supplements, the right approach. We start off with a 10-day program that's very effective at doing that. And so I would encourage anybody out there listening who would like more information to reach out and contact me personally at my office, and certainly check out my website at BeyondMTHFR.com. And just thank you again for your time and attention, and have a wonderful rest of your day.